Imagine, to fly on a plane today. And you land safely, but after 37 years. What's the story? A strange journey we've all heard of. And we always thought it was inspired by sci-fi filmmakers. But what will shock you, is the truth that came out of it. Flight 914. Dear followers, our episode today about a mysterious plane flight and perhaps the longest flight in the history of modern aviation, a flight on a plane that set off to a specific destination, but landed in a completely different destination. This is not the strangest thing about it since the plane landed after 37 years. How is it possible? Let's see, and travel today together on Flight 914. Flight 914 is an internal civilian flight on a Pan Am aircraft. It is one of the most prominent types of aircraft that provided travel services at the time, called Pan Am Flight 914. This flight took off from New York Airport on July 2, 1955 to Miami with 57 passengers on board in addition to 4 crew members. The situation was fine, the plane was safe from any malfunctions and the weather was clear. And nothing indicated that the weather is going to be turbulent. The plane took off from the runway, heading to its destination. The passengers were waiting for palm trees and clear seawater to appear, but what happened wasn't expected. Air traffic controllers lost the plane's signal, and the plane disappeared completely from radars. Miami Airport was contacted to make sure the plane reached its destination. But no answer. The aircraft was not even monitored on the radars of the control towers at Miami Airport. Strangest of all, the plane did not make any distress calls or even report any technical problem. Only the call was suddenly lost and the plane disappeared without trace. Search and rescue operations began along the path that the plane was supposed to take. But there was no trace of the plane or its wreckage or even the body of any of the passengers. Search expanded and the questions increased. Where is the wreckage of the plane? No answer, and after a search that lasted for more than 3 months, nothing related to the plane or its passengers was found. The authorities reached to a conclusion that the plane fell into the sea and sank with its passengers in a spot that rescue teams cannot reach. And the families of the victims received compensation from the responsible airline, and thus ending this case. Wait, do you think the case is over? Listen carefully. On the morning of September 9, 1992, Air Traffic Controller Juan de la Corte was doing his usual job at the Caracas Airport Control Tower in Venezuela, and without any warning, a black spot suddenly appeared on the monitoring screen without appearing first on the radar screen. Juan thought at first that there was a malfunction in the device. However, the spot was moving towards the airport until Juan and his team saw it clearly. The shock was that this spot was nothing but a plane. Not any aircraft, but an old design aircraft adopted in the 1950s and 1960s. And immediately, Juan picked up a signal from the plane. This signal was a question the captain addressed to the control tower. The question was, "Where are we?" Juan asked the captain to introduce himself before answering his question, but the answer was shocking. The captain replied, "We are Pan American Airways Flight 914 from New York to Miami with 57 passengers and 4 crew members on board." Juan and his team were shocked, since plane was similar to reports that a plane had disappeared of the same specifications 37 years ago without being able to find any trace of it. Secondly, that the plane deviated on a wrong path by about 1,800 kilometers from its original course. Juan asked the pilot if they had encountered any problems in landing that led to this great confusion. The answer was no. Juan gave the captain permission to land. And indeed the plane landed, and Juan was surprised by the extent of its age and its old engines. After the plane landed, the captain presented a report that shocked everyone who heard it. The captain reported that the plane was supposed to land at Miami Airport at 9:55 a.m. on July 2, 1955. After Juan woke up from his shock and asked the relief teams to head to the plane to help contain the shock of passengers and crew when they know the date. According to reports, the teams on the ground were able to see the faces of the passengers, who in turn were looking through the windows, amazed by what they were seeing. When Juan saw that everything was under control, he informed the captain that they were in Caracas, Venezuela, and that today was September 9, 1992. As soon as Juan finished his message, he heard on the radio the voice of the terrified captain screaming, "Oh, my God!" and the passengers screaming terrified after hearing the year they landed in. When he heard the screams, Juan asked rescue teams to intervene to calm the passengers, but what was not expected happened. The captain requested on the radio, "No one approaches, we are leaving now." And indeed the engines of the plane turned on and went through runway and set off in the sky. The captain did not care according to Juan to any safety standards, and did not even wait for a permission to take off, and what is strange is that the plane did not appear at all on the radars at Caracas airport. Juan continues that the airport immediately sent 3 planes to chase the plane, but the plane disappeared completely in the clouds without leaving any trace except for an annual calendar placed in the pocket, according to reports thrown by the captain of the plane before takeoff. Can you guess, my friends, for any year this calendar returns? Yes, to 1955. Then the plane took off again and disappeared again. Do you think the story is over? Again, you are wrong. According to reports received by several sites, the plane arrived in Miami as planned 37 years ago amid the astonishment of all airport staff. After questions and investigations, the authorities could not help but allow travelers to return to their homes and meet their families. Surprisingly, the passengers were the same age and shape as they traveled 37 years ago without being 1 year older. The crew and passengers did not answer any question other than that they were on the plane from New York to Miami in 1955. Here the story ended without any explanation from both the US and Venezuelan authorities. And the questions began to appear as the story spread on the media and social media. Did this incident really happen? If it is true, where has the plane been for 37 years? How did the time factor not affect passengers and aircraft? Research and analysis began to be issued in an attempt to solve the mystery of this incident. Several theories were proposed, one of which may not be believed by some of you. The first of these theories, which usually accompanies incidents of this kind, is the theory of time travel. According to an article published on Plane and Pilot Mag, this plane may have crossed through a time tunnel that led to its 37-year travel and landing in Caracas, Venezuela instead of Miami, and then returning from the same hole to Miami. This theory, of course, has been strongly opposed because there is no scientific evidence of the validity of time travel or tunnels. According to opponents of this theory, if the plane had already crossed through a time tunnel and have driven it to Venezuela 37 years later, and then returned through the same tunnel, it would arrive to Miami in the same year, 1955, and not after 37 years later. It is not logical. The other theory that has long been associated with aviation accidents is our famous triangle, the Bermuda Triangle. According to the Transit Light website, this theory was strongly proposed to explain what happened. According to the location, the aircraft crossed over the Bermuda Triangle and was exposed to something incomprehensible that led to its travel through time and space in this way. Of course, the aircraft was not harmed. While most Bermuda incidents ended with aircraft or ships being either completely or partially destroyed and completely disappeared without return, and nothing similar was reported in the incidents involving Bermuda. Mysterious thing happened. Then we must include our space friends, the aliens. Believers in other worlds in space have linked it to the fact that the plane was kidnapped by aliens and even tried to link the appearance of flying dishes at the same time as the plane disappeared. But of course the attempts failed totally. The believers of government conspiracy theory claimed that it was one of the experiences of the US government and linked it specifically to an area famous for its ambiguity, called Area 51. Of course this theory, like other theories, did not find support, especially since this region remains vague and controversial. Between the statements of the government and the opinions of the supporters. So where this story came from and what is the secret? After many investigations and vigorous attempts to uncover the circumstances of the incident, the most prominent logical explanation of what happened appeared. It was reported that the first mention of this incident before its news spread in such a large way was through an article for a newspaper called Weekly World News. This newspaper was established in 1979 by Generoso Pope. This newspaper continued to print in white and black, and was famous for publishing more than one topic without credibility. Despite this newspaper has received widespread, and some of its topics have taken the lead in topics that Americans read, including Bad Boy, Aliens and Our Subject, Flight 914. This newspaper continued as a paper newspaper until 2007, where it stopped for 2 years before being reissued as a digital online newspaper. Websites dealing with the display of fake facts and fabricated stories such as Fact Check, Teller Report, and Snopes carried out the necessary investigations and returned with the following analysis. The roots of the story dating back to 1985 in an article published in the Weekly World News about the incident of Flight 914. This article was written by a submerged writer named Eddie Klontz, who edited the newspaper until 2001, and then the newspaper republished the story twice in 1993 and 1999. Several things confirmed to investigators that the story may be fabricated. The first is that the newspaper, each time it republishes the story, it changes the date when the plane landed at Caracas Airport. One time in 1985 and then moves to 1990 to settle after it to 1992. And then comes the roll of the pictures used for the plane, where these pictures are also not of the type of Pan Am. Rather it's a DC-4 type that was used around 1935. Do you remember the air traffic controller Juan de la Corte, who had the most prominent role in the story and who spoke directly with the captain of the plane? Well, of course it was necessary to show a picture to give credibility to the subject. However, the newspaper changed one's image in each article, which reinforced the assumption that the story is from the writer's imagination. Investigators have completed their investigations and they were able to access the records of U.S. civil aviation. To be surprised by the lack of mention of this flight records of the investigations of aviation accidents between 1934 and 1965. All hypotheses remained in place regarding the strangest flight in the history of flights, Flight 914. Finally, tell me in comments what you know about the Flight 914.